as we were talking before we got started, my mother is 88 years old,
God
and
bless.
yeah, and she can't drive anymore. She has a hard time walking now. So me and my brothers all kind of take turns going there. Since I live the furthest, I come on the weekends,
Right.
and I take her to church. So I've been going back to church, which is obviously a good thing. And um, when I went to church, and it's a Sunday, I've noticed not there's people there, right? But it's not nearly like it was when I was a kid in the 80s when my mother used to drag me to church as a kid, right?
Right.
Where it was packed. You know,
Right.
there were people standing up in the back. And I've noticed a decline. So it made me do a little bit of research. I knew it was on a decline, but let me show you actually a graph I pulled up, and this is only from 2009 to 2019.
Okay.
That's just a 10-year period. And in this, I don't know if you could see that.
Yeah.
In this 10-year period, right? Here is this is Catholic and this is Protestant. This is the
Okay.
people, this was a Pew Research Center. It was basically a telephone survey where people called and asked what you identify as your religion. This is not even if you go to church or not.
Yeah.
And from 2009 to 2019, right here it's Catholic. It dropped 4% in 10 years.
Right.
But if you see here, nothing in particular, agnostic, atheist, it actually went up. It went up.
Right.
It went up well, not tremendously, but 5% in 10 years. And this is only from 2009 to 2019. This is not. I'm sure
Right.
if you bring it from 1980 or 1970, it's even more drastic, right?
Sure.
So, I want your opinion as to why you think it's dropping so drastically.
Well, for me anyway, I wouldn't at this point in my life consider myself religious. I would consider myself spiritual. I
Okay.
think with all that's gone on in the world and in the Catholic Church, and I can only speak to the Catholic Church because I was raised, um, in that environment.
Mm-hmm.
There was so much connected to that. Um, don't forget, my uncle was a priest. My father understood that whole um, arena because of my uncle, and my uncle did what he did. He helped the Bronx and all of that because of my father. This was not, you know, um, it's not the. So you have an idea of what the Catholic religion is, right? Growing up in my house, there was a lot of fear surrounding that religion. There was a lot of there were a lot of have tos. Otherwise, it was a mortal sin. If you didn't go to church on Sunday, if you didn't receive the communion, if you didn't go to confirmation, I'm sorry, if you didn't go to what do you call it? I'm having a brain fart.
Penance.
Penance. And then you went to church and you received communion. That's a mortal sin. There was so many things attached to it that I, even as a small child growing up, I was just like, yeah, I'm not buying this. I'm just not buying it, like,
Right.
and they would make,
I went through that.
yeah, they would make up things as they went along.
That is yes. Okay.
And
Yes. Yeah.
even today, if you stepped into a church and you actually had, if you listened, they changed even all the words,
Yeah.
everything that you say. Like I had to go to mass for someone's communion, confirmation, whatever it was, and I'm saying the words that I learned growing up, and I'm hearing people say different lines, and I'm
Right.
like, when did this change?
Yeah.
Right? Um, the whole eating meat on Friday, in Lent, you can't do it for whatever reason. But if you're
Mhm.
65 years old, that all changes. Like they
Right.
go and make up stuff as they go along.
Nobody respects an organization that doesn't stick to their own rules.
Exactly. But
Yeah.
even their own rules was based on fear. And I just was like, yeah, I can't connect to that.
Right.
So what I did was I just took what I felt comfortable with out of that religion, which
Mhm.
was I work consistently with Jesus, Mary, Mary Magdalene, who most people don't know was not a prostitute if they
Yeah.
lived the Catholic life, um, and the angels, the archangels, and whatever other masters, because that's in my world, that's what they are. They're teachers and they're masters.
Mhm.
They don't come as any religion. They don't like to connect to any religion. Okay. Even though the Catholics kind of wanted to take over Jesus and say he was, part of that world, the Jews will say, well, he was king of the Jews. So, he's of our world. He's of everybody's world. You know
Mhm.
what I mean? It's not. So, what I think people started to do is get a little bit like a bad taste in their mouth and say, okay, what's this really about? Now, for me, when I walk into a church today, if I ever go, I go on a day that there's no one there. There's no mass, there's nothing. I go and I sit because it's just like me communicating with Jesus, God, whoever in my home. It's like, here's where it is. It's in my heart, right?
Mhm.
That's where the church, in my opinion, is. It's in my
Mhm.
heart. That's where I go. I go straight to God and I say, okay, I'm having an issue with this. Maybe I hurt somebody with with words, maybe, and so I'm I'm in need of forgiving me
Mhm.
at that moment because God is all forgiving. It's just what it is. The forgiveness always has to do with the person forgiving themselves more ever than God.
Mhm.
So I think the decline is that people are seeing there's a they're seeing the truth of what it really is, right? The church expects you to give 10% of your earnings to
Mhm.
them, right? And to me, I'm sorry. It's like
Yeah.
I earned my money. If I'm
Yeah.
going to give, I'm going to give it because I feel like I'm going to give to the people,
Yeah.
not for you to take it and build a $5 million church.
Right. Right.
Like it's not
Right.
gonna, you know
Yeah.
what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I see it happening all the time. Listen, I am of the mindset that if you feel good going to church
Mhm.
because it brings something to you, then you do it.
Right.
That's the only way you feel like you can connect. I'd rather somebody connect than not connect at all.
Right. Right.
Okay. But I think the decline has to do with a million things
Yeah. I
where,
think it's not just one thing. Yeah.
where people are like, they know now, at least while I'm doing my work here and everything, they realize that they can speak to God anytime, that the
Mhm.
church is within them, that Jesus never really, if you go back and you really read between the lines and it was never supposed to be, quote unquote, a place to go and worship.
Mhm.
You worshiped. Where did he worship? He worshiped on the land.
Yeah. Yeah.
People followed him. They worshiped him outside,
Right.
you
Right.
know.
Right. 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 Right.
Um, so I think they took it, people, because that's what we do. They took it, they made a business of it, you know. They put these rules and regulations that um made the people scared straight so that they would do the bidding of quote unquote God.
Mhm.
But I realized that at a young age it just wasn't true. And I watched my mother and my father prayed all the time. My mother prayed all the time. The rosary in my house was, and I love it because I can truly connect to Mother Mary through that.
Mhm.
But I don't have to go in a church and do it.
Mhm.
You know what I mean?
Right. 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 Right.
So does that make what happened? I lost
Not,
you.
you did? I could still see you.
Okay.
Got me?
Um,
All right, good.
so is that helpful or
Yeah, yeah, it is, and I agree. But I think, see, the I was one of those people that growing up where I was like, yeah, the teachings of the Bible, especially the New Testament, like you said, when you read between the lines, are basically, good teachings.
Mhm.
The Old Testament is a lot more, fire and brimstone and so on
Right.
and so forth. But the new teachings are basically, um, uh, you know, teach you how to be a responsible human being, with the basic rules and so on and so forth. And let's not forget, the book was written 5,000 years ago, whatever it was.
Right.
And the New Testament, sorry, 2,000 years ago, whatever. But when you go, I truly believe that the decline of all these traditions is due to decline in community, because being part of a church was being part of the community.
Sure.
And so I take my mother to church every Sunday now, and you go in and you see young people taking their older relatives, you see parents taking their kids, you see married couples going together, you see some people going by themselves. And when you listen to the priest, they're still saying the same stuff that when I was a kid.
Sure.
Jesus was the Son of God, and he rose from the dead, and so on and so forth. It's the same routine. And when you start talking about when your teachings are about the miracles or about things that are kind of hard to really like that, he really rose from the dead, Moses really parted the Red Sea, it's easily dismissible.
Right.
It's easy. And I was one of those people, and it still is difficult for me to really believe that stuff because it's so over the top, right? But I people are yearning for a meaning now because they're so lost, especially young men. If you see the people that young men are following, like an Andrew Tate or Joe Rogan, or these young men are following these very, very masculine leadership quality kind of people, which is lacking in community.
Right.
So I think, and this is just my opinion and just my observations, when you go into church, it is basically a blueprint of how to be a responsible human being in order to make your community thrive. So, like, for example, right, the first thing you do when you walk into a church is genuflect, which nobody does anymore. It's unbelievable. Like, as a kid, I had to kneel. Now everybody just walks in, right? It's humbling. You're no better or no worse than anybody else in here. Everybody has to be humbled, right? Which is, there are going to be more successful people, less successful people, and it kind of puts everybody in an even keel. Like, you need to be humbled no matter what.
Right.
Penance. It's just being accountable. Everybody sins, but you have to be accountable for your mistakes. What mistakes did you make this week? And be accountable and tell me, right? If you're not accountable, you can't change. The first thing that happens when you go to Alcoholics Anonymous is you have to stand up and say, I'm an alcoholic. Right. I mean, you go down, the host, everybody eats. Everybody, if we have it, you share it with your neighbor. So everybody eats. Peace. When you give peace, chaos in a community doesn't help.
Right.
It's just a blueprint. I mean, I can go on and on and on. In marriage, the reason why you take vows is because that's the best way to raise children. Two parents in a house that stay together as a unit is the best way to raise children. And the rise of divorce and the rise of kids out of wedlock and single mothers is totally out of control. And the stats are staggering if you look at it. It's like, I think 75% of men that are in jail come from single mother homes. 75% of runaways come from single mother homes. I think the majority of mass shooters came from single mother homes. I mean, you go down the list, but if you have a father in the house along with a mother, you have a better chance of going to college. You have a better chance of having those values. And here's another stat that if you're a child and you go to church with your parents every Sunday, I think the stat is about 70% of those young kids continue to go to church as adults. Right. And I don't think the church is conveying this very much, because as we see community and people, it's basically becoming chaos. Right. I mean, we could see it in front of our eyes. Everything is, and there's also, I don't know if you know this, but there's a rise of paganism now.
That I didn't know.
Yeah, there's actually a rise of paganism. There's actually a woke paganism. And because people want some kind of order, right? I mean, nobody wants to live in a chaotic world. People want some kind of order. So when you abandon the new stuff, you go back to the old stuff. It's just, and I don't think the church is putting any effort into revamping, or trying to, your old style is not working.
Yes, they need to appeal.
Right.
They need to appeal to the new generations, so to speak, right? They also need to release the whole fear thing around it. When you say people need to be responsible, um, here's here's something I'm going to tell you. I stopped church, I stopped going to penance and all of that because I was judged when I went. I tried to be the good Catholic when I was young and go see the priest and sit with him, but I ended up being judged for what I was saying or what I was talking about. And it left such a bad taste in my mouth that I said, to myself, I'm like, well, I don't need him to absolve me because I know I can be absolved just by speaking to God, And so the work that I do, I'm a psychic medium. I can connect very easily at any moment. And this is what I try to teach people to do, that they can connect at any time. And I'm speaking to God, or I'm speaking to Jesus, or whoever it is I'm speaking to. And I'm saying to them, this is how I feel. Can you help me through this? I'm willing to forgive myself and the other person, and on and on and on and on. And that to me feels right for me. Okay. Because it's like you said before, nobody's above or below anybody, right? So just because you're a priest doesn't make you above me.
Right.
What you're supposed to be doing, as anybody that is, even my father or anybody that's running an organization or trying to help other people, you don't look at yourself as above or below anything. You try to get on people's level and understand them.
Right.
And understand where they're coming from and understand who they are. But if you're going to judge me for things that I'm coming to you in confidence with, because I'm struggling, then you're not really, then you don't belong where you're sitting, right?
Right.
Imagine if I did my work in judgment, right? Imagine if, people that came to me and I'd be like, oh my God, how could you do something about, and I'm on and on and on about it. That's not helping someone, right? You have to be able to be in their shoes and understand what they're experiencing in order for you to help them. And so, that left a horrible taste in my mouth. And again, I'm going to repeat, there are people that like that. They like to be able to do that. And
yes, it's an
they
abuse of
feel
power.
very
Absolutely.
comfortable with, okay, go say, 10 Hail Marys, 10 Our Fathers, you're absolved.
Right.
It was never meant to be that way from what I'm hearing, in my own work with spirit. The forgiveness comes within. Once you forgive yourself, you're automatically forgiven in spirit. It's not even a question. There's no human being that needs to do it for you. The community piece, I understand, because I feel when you do have a strong community, you're able to thrive.
Right.
As a community, as a nation, as whatever, right? Here's what I feel is going on, though. The patriarchal world, the male world, is having a really hard time balancing their opposite energy, or I want to say opposite, but it could be really synergistic. It's the masculine and the feminine energy. We all have it in us,
Right.
right? So when you can allow both sides of you to be that in the world, we'll say, in the world, then you're going to have a community of greatness, because everybody then could begin to accept each other because they're balanced now in that energy.
Mhm.
Okay. But you see, we're struggling because we're in a very patriarchal society, right? Run by mostly men, right? And what is the drive? The drive is money, the drive is greed. This is what's creating a lot of stuff here. Okay. But now we're all in awareness of the matriarch having to come in and balance that energy. There are people that don't want that to happen because it changes the core of what it's been for so long. And in that core, again, it's like the religion. In that core, they can have control. It's the same thing with the religion. They want that control. So my job doing my work is, how can we get as many people to understand we all have this masculine feminine energy in us. We just have to balance it out in the world now, so that we can come together in unity.
Yeah.
And accept one another, and you know what I'm saying, for who you are. It doesn't matter who you are. There's so many things now. Gender. How many names do we have now? Even people that don't even, they go by pronouns, right? Why is this all happening? It's about all the acceptance. It's about coming to a place of neutrality, like a neutral zone where people are accepted for just who they are, regardless of what they call themselves.
Right.
You know, religion doesn't bring that into play. Now, you had mentioned before about having a male, a man, a woman, and child in the house, where, you know, it's the statistics are the child will grow up, you know, and have a better future or whatever. But you know, I come from that, right? I came from the male, female.
Well, yours was extreme, though. I mean, let's be, yours was very extreme.
I've seen it. I've seen it over and over again. There are people, and this is where we talk about contracts. There are people that come in with contracts. They're supposed to be together for X amount of time, right? Sometimes it lasts for the length of the, for the length of the lives that they're here. They have their children, they live the life, all of that, and it's fabulous. The majority of that is not that, though, right? People come, they have children, they get married, they go as far as they can take the relationship, and then sometimes the contract is just over. But it doesn't mean that the children won't benefit even if they were to separate. It just means that it's an experience that everybody had to have in order to learn something from it. I'm coming from a spiritual standpoint,
right.
as opposed to a religious standpoint.
Yeah. You said one thing that I agree with, and then one thing I disagree with. So the one thing that I agree with is I agree that I truly believe that the money and the major companies are trying to misinform
Yes.
and not have people in their natural energy so that they can profit. I totally agree with that. We raise men today to be feminine, which is not natural. I understand that there are men that are more feminine, more masculine, natural. I get it. And then we raise women to be like men, right? Where it's like, you don't need a man, go get yours. You never settle for a man. Get your education, so on and so forth. And then you have this, you kind of have people that are not living in their true energy, if you will, right?
Right.
and it does cause chaos. And the reason why I say I think it's for profit is, I mean, antidepressants are on the rise.
Mm.
Anti-anxiety pills are on the rise. Like, okay, so I am, if you are clinically depressed,
Right.
meaning that your serotonin level is off and so on and so forth, yes, you do need medication, right?
Right.
But the majority of people that are quote unquote oppressed are just going through a rough time, or they're upset about something. Something happened, somebody, a relative dies, or they lose a job, and they go seek therapy, which is a good thing, but they don't need medication. But they tell them, hey, listen, if you take this medication,
Mm-hmm.
right, it could help. Your little boy is acting out. If he takes ADHD medication,
Mm-hmm.
right, he won't be a problem anymore. Meanwhile, he's just being a little boy,
Right.
right? Um, the other thing is the problem, like I don't know, there are. I'd have to. I did not do my research on this, but I'd have to go back and recheck it. Your um, if two people divorce,
Mm-hmm.
first of all, there's no fault divorce legal in every state, which
Yep.
means somebody could just say, I don't want to be this in this marriage anymore.
Right.
The majority of divorces end up with the female having custody, not equal custody, and then the father having visits every other weekend.
Right.
Every other weekend is not sufficient enough to be relevant in a
100%.
child's life.
100%.
So I do believe that for profit, that they are purposely kind of doing this. And I think they're short-sighted, because in the future it's going to say, and we already see it happening, right, with the decline of community, decline of church, and a decline of responsible human beings. Nobody's accountable anymore, and so on and so forth.
Right.
So when two people get divorced, the majority of times of what happens is that the father doesn't have sufficient time, right?
Yes.
And again, these are just numbers, so I don't mean to upset you. This is just the research I've done. Okay.
Yeah, no,
uh,
not at all.
there's about 50% divorce in the country, but it's
Yes.
actually dropped because marriage has dropped.
Yes.
So I don't know if you know, but David's bridal dresses,
Yep.
that company is going bankrupt because nobody's buying. The decline of engagement rings is extreme because nobody's getting married.
Right.
Their young women are being told, which if they were being told to have balance, like you're saying, it would be fine. But they're not being told that. They're being told, push off family, push off. You need to be happy. That's first and foremost. Spend your 20s and 30s climbing the corporate ladder, getting an education, having experiences, having fun. Science could take care of everything. You could freeze your eggs. You could have kids at an older age, and then a lot of times what happens is that woman winds up single, or science doesn't take care of everything.
Mm-hmm.
And the message should be, it's fine to have a career, but try to have balance in your career, in your family,
That's right.
instead of pushing this particular agenda, which I think is falling apart. And on the other end, men are being told that they're toxic, what their masculinity is not good for.
Mm-hmm.
And then people can confuse masculinity, responsible masculinity, with abuse, and that's not what responsible masculinity is.
That's right.
you know you can't you can't argue a point with an outlier. Are there men that have been abusive or are abusive to this day? Absolutely. Right. But
Yep.
if I say to you, Rita, are men more loyal now to women or 75 years ago?
I got to tell you the truth. I don't.
clearly it was 75 years ago. I mean,
Well, I want to
have
say,
men used to have if you didn't have a girlfriend, there was something wrong with you.
yeah,
Yeah, you know what I mean.
yeah.
You know,
Well, yeah, because people thought, oh, they're
right.
right,
But but today men are clearly more loyal because they're taught that those ways are bad, and it is bad. It's not good to have children with other women while you're married, right? And 75 years ago, that was common. Oh my God! Like if you didn't have a girlfriend, like there, you were a wimp. I don't want to use the actual. You were a mutt. That's a better term to use. If you didn't have a girlfriend, every one of my father's friends had girlfriends, and they weren't even gangsters. They were just guys.
right. Yeah,
My
that's just what it
father,
was.
yeah. So clearly, men are more faithful. But what's happening is, because you're told, because women are told don't respect men and so on and so forth, women are being increasingly unfaithful. The stats show like this opposite happening, right? So you basically you're having all this chaos. I'm trying to tie it into the decline of the church, and I think you're having this chaos that's happening within our culture, and the church is viewed as this old world, an old world, old community that we don't need to pay attention to anymore. We don't need to respect anymore. And I think the church needs to revamp. And it's great to tell the teachings of Jesus, but at the same time, they need to convey this message of community and people coming together, and what it is to be a responsible masculine man, like raising your son to be a man and raising your daughter to be a respectful woman, at the same time being able to possibly go on to have a career. There's nothing wrong with it.
Right.
Conveying that, divorce should be the last thing you should think of, because when you take those vows and you take it in front of people, the reason why you take those vows in front of people is because those people are witnesses. Traditionally, that's what it meant. You're taking these vows before God, before the church, and the people in the pews are witnesses, and that's traditionally what it meant. And there are people that don't go to church and say they're Catholic or say they're Christian, but they'll have an OnlyFans page. You know what I mean? Or they'll go, I'm trying to think of something, of guys at work. They'll go to the bar and they'll drink all night long, and then this is only like a handful of guys. I'm trying to give an example. And they go to work the next day and never even go home. Right? This is not healthy, and we're living in a world where it's chaotic. And if the Catholic Church doesn't revamp themselves and appeal to young people, a younger generation, but at the same time, you still need rules. Nobody respects an organization that doesn't stick to its own rules. So if you have rules, they're set in stone, then you stick to them, right? And like when I was young, as a kid, I used to play basketball for Saint Athanasius. They used to have a kids basketball team and guys would volunteer to be basketball coaches and so on and so forth. I don't know if the church still has community things that go on like this anymore. I have no idea. But if they do, it's obviously not. It's obviously not advertised. I mean, they're leaving social media behind, right? They're leaving the word for the community behind, and I think they really need to revamp and have this, give the basic messages of the New Testament. You could include the miracles and so on and so forth, but the basic teachings of the New Testament, even the Old Testament, don't get me wrong, right, are really good in how people should strive to be and how people should come together as a community. And it's all just falling apart. And the thing is, the majority of people, and I'm not putting me or you into this category, the majority of people they kind of walk around blind. They go to work, they don't see it. But anybody who's aware and could see it, it's actually frightening. because if you
Mhm.
don't have order and you don't have chaos, it's like a table without the screws in it. It's going to fall apart sooner or later. It's going to
Right,
happen.
right.
And I don't see the church stepping up and actually doing anything about this,
No, it's very much what it's always been, status quo. They don't change anything unless it benefits them. And it's interesting. I know someone who used to work for the Vatican
But really, wow.
in Rome, and actually chose to leave
Mm,
because of the corruption and the chaos and the amount of money they were watching people in the streets suffer, and yet they were surrounded by all this money and gold and jewels and you
right,
name
right,
it,
right.
and couldn't take it no more, had to leave,
Yeah,
and that's what are we I don't know, what are we showing people, right?
yeah,
It's not that you can't have things, even with priests. Honestly, I'm of the belief that they should be able to get married,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
and have a family. Deacons do it. I mean, I, none of this. I don't know who conjured this up, but I just don't. I don't believe in it. But they're not making the effort to move with the way the world is moving, and you have to. It's changing.
Mhm.
Things are changing. If you want to create a community, but I've seen communities, regardless of religion. I've seen people come together in community because I've I've watched it just with my work,
Yeah, yeah,
and the people that are saying, the kind of community we need or we want is where everybody is of equal energy. Like we're all here doing our thing.
yeah,
We don't want to be, especially growing up in my house, we don't want to be women that, we're told get married, have kids. You don't, you don't, you don't make a career. You take care of your mother until she passes, and that's the end of it.
mhm.
We don't put limits on people. That's just not what needs to be. Like
Right,
everybody
right,
should
right.
be limitless and be able to do exactly what they want to do. But if they make the commitment, this is the thing. It's like you make a commitment to someone, you're deciding to have children for whatever reason, you at least do your best to make that happen. If in
Yeah,
the end it doesn't happen, okay.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
real easy now though to get in and out of things.
Oh,
People
and
don't people don't want to even try.
I
You
mean,
know?
and they it's just, the one thing that drives me crazy is when somebody says, well, I'm not happy in my relationship. And I'm like, well, I don't understand that,
Mm.
because if seeing your children grow up well and seeing your husband or your wife being involved with your children and putting them first, if you will, if that doesn't make you happy, then you really need to prioritize. I Because I think what you're saying is, um, I want to put myself first, and I can't.
Or maybe they're not happy with themselves. Maybe
Oh
it's
yeah, okay,
and it's
yeah, with
and it's
themselves.
reflecting on, the relationship. But
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
always I always tell people you got to look in the mirror first.
Oh,
You
100%. Yeah,
you
yeah,
have to. I mean, if you're not happy, that's where you go first.
right.
The relationship, people argue over the stupidest shit.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
and they think it's the end of the world, and it's not.
No,
Like you just
it's
have to be able to work through stuff. Now,
yeah,
is everybody meant to be together forever? No. Like I said before, sometimes people come in, they contract out for an X amount of time. They're done with that contract. They maybe move into another contract.
mhm.
Male, female, makes no difference. Like two
Right,
men, two women, a
right,
man and a
right, right,
woman
right, right.
makes no difference. And I'm of the belief that two women can raise a child and
Mhm.
two men can raise a child, because all in all, it's all about love. You cannot
Yeah,
make a child gay. This was the belief in my house. Like, how can we pray to change her ways? You
yeah,
know, like I came into
yeah.
the life.
What's funny is I actually tried doing some research
Yeah.
about that, about how children come from, two mother homes, two father homes, so on and so forth. But the thing is that that's so new that there's no stats yet on how the kids turn out. And so it's I am listen, I am of the belief that so it's just got to go on what I think and say like an educated opinion, because there is no, because I'm a stats guy. Like if you show me stats, I try to ignore my emotional side and go, well, that's what's happening. That has to be addressed. If two people willingly want to have children and want to raise two children, odds are it's probably going to fare well. Right. So if two people come together and want to have two women come together and they want to raise children, or they're making the decision that they're going to raise children together and this is what they want, I'd have to believe that odds are it's going to fare well for the child. Now,
especially if there's tremendous love there, right? Because really, that's what it comes down to.
Yeah. But you know, again, like I said, there was actually, I couldn't find any stats because it's such a new phenomenon that we're going through that there's actually no studies done on it yet, right? Because of this YouTube channel, I have to keep my finger on the pulse with stats. It just can't come on here and just ramble.
Right.
Because it doesn't, you know, people wouldn't take me serious if that was the case. Because then they start doing their own stuff and they go, well, John doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. You know? But yeah, it's just we're losing the youth. And people are being misguided. I'm going to go a little bit on a I don't know what your opinion is, but I'm going to go a little bit on another topic. But this is what I mean by it being extreme, and we're losing the youth for profit. I made an example before of that there are some people that are clinically depressed,
right?
And I've been battling it since I'm 10 years old, right? And I take Zoloft, every night. But now there's new studies saying that serotonin levels have nothing to do with depression. So now I have to talk to my doctor and see if I should really stay on this medication, right? But whatever, it doesn't matter. Right. So, and then there are people that just are upset and they say, well, you could take this medication, it'll make you feel better. I am of the opinion, and I might be dead wrong, is that the reason why they're pushing the trans thing is because when kids are growing up, like somebody like yourself as a teenager, if you're confused and you go seek help and they go, well, maybe you're not a woman, maybe you're really a boy. And then we could prescribe estrogen blockers and pro hormones, and we could go through surgeries, and that's a lot of money. That's a lot of money in the pharmaceutical world, in the medical world. And I think that's the only logical rationalization as to why I think this is being pushed, right? Because there are hospitals that will give teenage girls with parental consent hysterectomies. I mean, there are. I mean, there's a what do you call it? A reality show, Jazz. And it's basically about a girl who, it's been on for like 10 years now. And it's basically, now she's a girl, but she was a boy. And when she was very young, I think 11 or 12, the mother had started this transition. And I mean, when you get into details about it, it gets really hard to swallow, if you will, right? So for example, when they castrate you and they make a vagina, if you will, they actually it's just a wound. They just cut it open because that's not supposed to be there. So they just cut it open. But the body wants to heal it. So what you actually have to do is you have to go to sleep every night with a dilator and keep it open. You know, and I truly think this is the only rational reason as to why. And major pharmaceuticals and major medical companies and so on and so forth, they got, they have their politicians in their back pocket. And this is for me why I think this is being pushed, because there's probably a tremendous amount of profit. I think the country is so lost that the people that are in charge aren't thinking about the good of the country or the people. They're thinking about lining their pockets.
And that's the truth. Now, I
Yeah.
don't know if that's particularly why it's being pushed, but I can
Right.
tell,
That's just my
yeah,
guess.
I can tell you that I know for sure that greed has probably, stats on, I don't even know if we could do stats on greed, but greed is like beyond what it's ever been.
Right.
Back in my mom and dad's era, people would help one another. Nobody
Yeah.
was, in that neighborhood, in that,
Rita, I
in
don't even
that,
know my neighbors' names.
yeah, no, there's, forget about it. But back then, like if you needed something, I remember my mother telling me a story where there was, my mother was growing up, they were poor, but she went to a birthday party where the person, um, family had money. The
Mhm.
kids that went to the party ended up coming home with presents because
Uh,
they they didn't have anything, right?
yeah. Yeah.
So that is what I'm talking about. It's like you got to look at the whole,
Yeah. And it's
but
all gone.
greed is driving this country. Greed
Yeah.
is driving this country. The medicine, so sad, the doctors cannot get paid anymore with their worth getting paid because the insurance companies are killing them.
Yeah. So,
The drugs that are being made, I never say drugs are bad because right now we're in need of certain things here.
oh yeah. There's a benefit, obviously. Yeah.
There's a benefit, but they are pushing things
Oh,
for sure. Like
yeah.
vitamin D is vitamin D, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
could get vitamin D, but all of a sudden doctors are prescribing vitamin D.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
makes me nuts.
Yeah.
Makes
Yeah.
me a little
Yeah.
crazy. Like, come on, it's vitamin
Yeah.
D. But
You could get it over the
again,
counter. Why are we prescribing it? Yes.
it's
Yeah. Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
the whole. That's that whole like marketing.
Right.
Where can we go next to make the next buck instead of helping the greater good, right?
Right.
How can we help people um, connect to themselves and love themselves? And if we worked a little bit more on those kind of things, we would we would not be like this.
Yeah. We'd be in a
We would
much
be
better place. Yeah.
more coherent, right?
Watch the movie A Man Called Otto with Tom Hanks.
Okay.
I watched it the other night. I'm not gonna lie, it's a little bit of a tearjerker. It's sad, but the movie is basically based on how communities come together.
Yeah.
But I know I can only speak for the Northeast. There are no communities that come together anymore. Like I said, I only know, and I try, believe me, like to talk to my. I'm a talker,
Yeah.
and I try. I mean, I have one neighbor that I'm relatively friendly with.
Hmm.
That's not even like come over and hang out. It's not even like that to that extent.
Right.
The other people I don't even barely know their names. They don't,
Right.
it's just not there anymore. But I'm going to give you the last word, and I'm going to ask you, what do you think that the church can do to improve attendance and people coming together again?
I think the first word that comes to mind is acceptance,
Mm-hmm.
regardless of who you are and who you love, and um, that shouldn't make a difference in any church, as far as I'm concerned. But acceptance, not having greed as the driving force, um, and not having, because to me, there's an agenda when you're looking at it for your own purposes. Like we need to make it about the community, not about what your agenda is here, not about the money, not about whatever it is that you're looking to benefit from the people. What can you do for the people to help it benefit everybody?
Mm-hmm.
And they have to start making some changes where they're an accept. I don't care what church it is. It doesn't matter what religion and what church, but
No, it's true.
it
All
has to
churches
be.
are on the decline, with the
It,
exception of Islam and so on and so forth.
yeah, there has to be an acceptance of everyone,
Mhm.
regardless of male, female. They want to change their sex. It's not something lightly, that piece of it is not something lightly you go into anyway. right?
Mhm.
Now, I was born a female. I'm quite honestly had to get used to being in a female body because in many lifetimes I was a male. So I wasn't
Mhm.
used to being in this body,
Mhm.
right? I did feel more comfortable relating to the male energy, but I had to find the feminine. And I did,
Right.
so that piece, you see, I worked through it. Now, not everybody can do that. There are some people that say, I was born in this body, but I'm not supposed to be in this body.
Mhm.
It's not for me to judge that, right? It's not for the church to judge it either. There's a lot of judgment here. And
Mhm.
that's the piece I think needs to change
Mhm. Okay. All
for
right.
everybody to come together.
Oh, Rita, it's always a pleasure.
Oh my God, I hope we do this again. I love
Yeah,
talking about this stuff.
yeah, we'll definitely do it again because you're the first person that came to mind when I'm taking my mother to church. I'm
Ah,
like, yeah,
thank you,
absolutely.
honey.
I'm like, I got to get you on. We got to talk about
I appreciate
this.
anytime you ask me, I get excited. I'm like, I love
Good,
talking to
good.
John.
I'm glad. Thank you so much. I really, truly appreciate it, and I truly appreciate doing it so early on a Sunday morning.
Oh, I'm up. Listen, I'm up at the crack of dawn. It's a killer day. When your body just says, "Yeah, we're up at 5 every day." It's even on
Yeah,
a weekend. I can't seem
yeah,
to
yeah,
sleep.
yeah.
So, but
I understand definitely, but thank you so much, Rita. Always much love and much respect. Well, we'll be in
same here,
touch
man.
because we always stay in touch, and
Okay, babe.
I'll let you know when this comes out.
Perfect.
Thank you
Perfect. Thank
very
you
much.
so
Have a
much,
good
honey.
day. All
You
right, bye
too,
bye.
love. Bye bye.